Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Dietrich, and I am with the Employment Unit at Community Legal Services. I'm here today with my colleague Janet Ginsberg, and we are going to speak with you about your legal rights if you are a laid off worker or know a laid off worker, which unfortunately virtually all of us do these days. Let me preview for you what we're going to be doing this early afternoon over lunch here on Worker Wednesday. We will be talking about benefits that you might be entitled to. I will address that first. Um, and then my colleague Janet Ginsberg will present to you on employment barriers that you may face when you try to go back onto the labor market and how you can get a free lawyer at Community Legal Services. So that is what we will present, and then we will take your questions at the end of the presentations. So with no further ado, let me go ahead and tell you about the benefits you can get. So we're going to talk about basically cash benefits, health insurance benefits in my presentation. And let's start by talking about unemployment. Um, Basically, most of you probably know about the regular unemployment system that we have during times that are not pandemics. That still exists, and over 1.8 million people have applied for unemployment benefits through the state system since the pandemic started about 8 weeks ago. Basically, under the state law unemployment system, you can get 26 weeks of benefits if you qualify. Unfortunately, many people do not qualify for state unemployment benefits. And because of that, Congress has created three programs that supplement what we usually have. And they are the three pandemic programs that are listed here on this slide. So first of all, and maybe most important, there's a program called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. And PUA, as it's known, is a really important program because it provides coverage to people who were not otherwise eligible for unemployment benefits. So that would include, for instance, gig workers, if you work for Lyft or Uber, for instance. It includes people who are self-employed. It includes people who are not financially eligible for unemployment benefits based on their wage history, and many others. So if you apply for state unemployment benefits and you are denied, I strongly encourage you to apply for PUA. I'm sorry to say that the application for PUA, and I'll get you the link shortly at which you apply. The application for PUA is very glitchy, and you may run into trouble. But I do hope you'll give it a try and stick with it and apply if you can. If you cannot master it or you run into some problem, feel free to contact CLS to see whether we can help you with your claim. So PUA is one program Congress created. A second is a program called Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. And that program only started a few days ago. It was announced by the governor's office over the weekend. It provides basically extended benefits if you have used up your 26 weeks since July of last year. So if you are in that position and have already used up your 26 weeks, you should be hearing from the unemployment system that you can apply for another 13. If you're currently still eligible for benefits, you shouldn't even have to apply. It should be a seamless situation where they just add another 13 weeks to your claim. So that's a good benefit also. Finally, a lot of people have already learned about pandemic unemployment compensation. That is an extra $600 a week that you get, even if you get one benefit of unemployment benefits in a particular week between April and July of this year. So let's say you're getting unemployment benefits not because you're completely unemployed, but because you have reduced hours of work, and maybe you're getting a very small benefit. You will still get the $600 a week. Or if you get PUA or PEUC, either of those benefits, the federal benefits, will also provide you with the $600 a week. If you do the math, that can be $10,000 between the April and July time period. So that is a very helpful benefit that exists during that period of time. Now, between the state UC benefits and the federal programs, you can get a total of 39 weeks of benefits. Um, the federal programs will end in December of 2020, except for the $600, which ends in July. And in past recessions, there have been extensions often of these programs, but for now, that's what the law provides in terms of unemployment benefits. So again, regular UC is where you start. If you're not eligible, then you move to PUA. If you've run out of benefits, you move to PEUC. The $600 gets paid on all claims between July and September. I'm sorry, between April and July. Okay, how do you apply? By far the best way to apply, if you can, is on the website that has been created for the unemployment program. So here's the URL. It's the same website that you use to apply for either regular unemployment benefits from the state or the PUA. Now, unfortunately, there's not even a way to apply for PUA that's not online. That's the only place to go. Theoretically, you can apply for unemployment, regular unemployment benefits by calling the system, but with almost 2 million people having applied for unemployment, unfortunately, it's next to impossible to get through on the phone. So what we recommend that you do if you're applying for regular UC and you do not have a computer is call the application hotline that our sister program, Philadelphia Legal Assistance, has. They will use their computers to help you apply. Unfortunately, there is no similar situation for PUA. So you're going to need to find somebody who can help you file that application with a computer. The PUA application is fairly complicated, and I just wanted to give you a heads up about the information you should pull together if you are applying for PUA, so you're not trying to find it while you're already in the middle of the application. And basically what you need to have for them is documentation of your 2019 income. You're going to be asked to upload those documents, so have them organized on your phone or your computer so that you can upload them. They're going to ask you what your income was for each calendar quarter of 2019. So January through March, April through June, etc. So figure out as best as you can how that 2019 income is divided between the quarters. And then finally, they're going to ask you about your work history over the last 18 months. Now, if you are, say, a self-employed person, and they're asking you who your employer was, that becomes confusing because you were your employer. So just treat it as though it's asking for the obvious, even though it sounds more like they're asking you whether you have an employer that gives you a paycheck. Put down yourself. As I said, the PUA application is glitchy. It may leave you scratching your head as you try to move your way through it. But a lot of people have been getting through and are getting their regular benefits plus their $600. So stick with it and hopefully you will succeed. Now, many people who are already getting unemployment benefits are worried because they are being called back to work, or they expect to soon be called back to work by their employer. And that can be a very stressful time because many people feel like they have good reason not to go back to work. In the law, that's often called good cause. If you don't go back to work, there's a chance, if your employer calls you back and you say no, that you could have your unemployment benefits cut off, which would, of course, be a disaster. However, all of the things listed on this slide are supposed to be reasons why you might have good cause not to go back to work. So let's say that you're worried about your health and safety because potentially you are a high risk person based on your health history, or your spouse or child or parent who lives with you has a illness that would make them at high risk if they caught COVID from you. That may be a reason, good cause, not to return to work. Another thing is if your employer is operating in violation of the governor's stay-at-home order. In other words, they are not a life-sustaining business. That would potentially be a reason to say, no, I'm not prepared to come back to work. If you're worried about your childcare, maybe your childcare center is reopening, but they have not satisfied you that it is going to be safe for your child there. Um, or if your employer is making a major cut to your salary or benefits. Any of those things could be good cause not to go back to work. Now, it is very important that you communicate with your employer about any of these reasons, if that is why you were thinking you may decline to come back to work. And we recommend that you do it in writing. So if there's ever any contest about whether you engaged in that discussion with your employer, you can show them, your email that you sent. Um, so know that these are the reasons, and I understand this is not a simple decision to make because nobody can guarantee you that the unemployment authorities are going to see it your way. They say they'll make decisions on a case by case basis, but know that if you can articulate a strong reason not to return to work, hopefully you'll be able to keep your unemployment benefits going. Switching gears for a bit, a different type of assistance is a program that the Department of Human Services, the State Department of Human Services, has just announced. Um, this is for people who are not getting unemployment. You can't get both unemployment and emergency cash assistance, but let's say your unemployment application has been held up for a long time, or for some reason you're just not going to be able to get unemployment or PUA. Uh, you can apply for this emergency cash assistance grant if you meet the qualifications that are listed on the slide. So one of the primary ones, of course, is that you have to have children or be pregnant, and that you were working until the pandemic started and you lost at least half of your income. You also have to have very low assets, savings, and have an income that's fairly low. If you meet those standards, please apply for emergency cash assistance as soon as possible because June 12th is the deadline. But actually, it could be sooner than that if the money that DHS has runs out. The Compass application that DHS has is how you can apply online. That's the URL for the application for emergency cash assistance. Again, if you're not getting unemployment benefits, apply for this as soon as possible. This is one of the few programs where if there is an undocumented person in your household, you can still qualify for the people in your household who are citizens. So be aware that this may be a good resource if you are in a family with both documented and undocumented folks. Another really important thing for people who are unemployed is the question of what do I do about my health insurance now that my employer is cutting me off? There are a couple of options, but the one that you know best, probably Cobra, is also probably your worst option. People know about Cobra because the law requires your employer to send out an application or a notice to you, what's called a Cobra notice often, saying that you can decide that you're going to pick up the cost of your health insurance. The problem with that, it sounds good, is that the amount of money it's probably going to cost you is more than you can afford to pay when you're unemployed. And it isn't even necessarily the best option in terms of the insurance that you'll get, because you can get very high quality insurance from the other two sources that we've listed here on this slide. The medical assistance program is absolutely free if you qualify. Again, you can apply for medical benefits through the MA program through Compass. And the income limits are higher than you might think. So definitely worth finding out whether you can qualify for those benefits. Now, if you earn too much to qualify for medical assistance, they will then point you instead to the marketplace, as it's called, where you buy your own health insurance from a state organized marketplace of insurance companies. This is better than COBRA because it is heavily subsidized, and it should not cost you nearly as much money as COBRA coverage would cost. It's practically affordable. Now, here's the glitch with the marketplace. There is a short window of opportunity to get this insurance if you need it. You have to do it within 60 days of the day you lost your employer's insurance, or you're not going to be able to get it again until the end of the calendar year. So you would go through the rest of 2020 without having insurance coverage. Now, that's all complicated, but there are two pretty easy ways to figure out how you're going to get the insurance that you need. One is you can just go ahead and apply on Compass for medical assistance, and that will stop the 60-day clock for you if you need the marketplace instead, because you're not eligible. The other is you can call the Pennsylvania Health Action Network, where people who answer the phone there will be very happy to give you counseling and advice about how you should make this decision. So that way you're not scratching your head about which insurance should I pick. If you have to go through the marketplace, which company is better for me, they will help you both apply and make the decisions, the complicated health insurance decisions that you have to make. So call FAN. I would recommend that would be the best way for you to proceed. But do not wait. Let's say you were laid off in March and your coverage ended at the end of March. Probably it's going to end, the 60-day period will end in the next week or so. So do not wait. Proceed with this as soon as possible, especially because we have Memorial Day on Monday. If you want more information about any of these topics, you can find it on CLS's website. We have a specific corner of our website for coronavirus issues, and there's a window there that says information for workers. And there is a lot of information about the topics I've been talking about and about other things that we've not talked about on that webpage. So check it out. And with that, I will turn things over to Janet, who will talk to you about employment barriers work that we do at CLS, and that might be important to you when you're trying to get back into the workforce. Janet?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Just give me one moment. Okay. I'm just trying to get control of the screen. It's not working to switch this, to move the slides.
It says it's waiting for you to control my screen. Did you click yes?
I did.
Stop and try it again. How's that?
Okay, well, okay. All right, let's try it again. Otherwise, I will just have Sharon control my screen for me. So Sharon, your screen isn't showing anymore.
Oh, dear. All right.
We're all learning how to work remotely, and so far I have not had anything go off completely without a hitch, but we're getting there. By Worker Wednesday number 8, we're going to have it down.
All right. Bear with me. Okay. Can you see the screen?
I can see your screen. Let me request remote, although it's not in full presentation mode, but that's okay.
Yep, we're getting there.
Okay. All right, I've requested remote access.
And you are approved.
Yeah, it's not moving with my computer. It did yesterday when we practiced. So Sharon, can you be my?
I would be glad to.
Okay, I'm going to give up control. Okay, so as Sharon said, my name is Janet Ginsberg. I am a senior staff attorney at Community Legal Services, also in the employment unit. And we're going to pivot here a little bit to talk about an issue which, you know, on its face is going to seem to be not related to what Sharon was talking about. But it's related in the sense that, you know, the world we're living in with COVID-19 and hopefully eventually post-COVID-19, there are a lot of complications. Things are not simple. So what we have seen and what many of you know is that getting a job is hard enough if you have a criminal record or a child abuse record. People with records, you know, often apply for jobs. The majority of employers do background checks. Some are even required by law to do background checks. And what we often find is that people with criminal records are sometimes the last people to be offered the job and have a lot of trouble struggling with that. When we come out of COVID-19 and businesses start opening up again, you know, the unemployment rate has gone way up under COVID-19, and having a criminal record is going to make it just that much harder to get a job. So, you know, we urge people, if you can get a record cleared, get it cleared. And I'm going to walk through with you the different kinds of criminal records there are. And I also just want to add that even with a criminal record, people do have some rights. There are some restrictions on what employers are allowed to consider, depending on the age of the conviction, depending on the circumstances, depending on what you've done with your life since. I'm not going to go into those laws during this presentation, but I do want you to know that even if you can't get the record cleared, you do have some ways that we may be able to help you, or ways that you may be able to preserve your right to employment. Next, Sharon. So I'm going to talk first about criminal records. I'll talk about child abuse records afterward. There are some kinds of records that can be expunged by filing a motion with the court. And what expungement means is that a petition is filed, a judge signs an order, and the record essentially gets destroyed. It no longer appears on court websites. It no longer appears in the Pennsylvania State Police repository. And it means that really nobody can see that, you know, can get access to the criminal record at all. The kinds of records that can be expunged are arrests. And by arrests, I mean arrests that didn't end in conviction. So arrests can be expunged, and ARDs, which are accelerated rehabilitative disposition. It's a very long phrase. But what ARDs are, there are several programs in the courts where you're not getting a conviction, but you agree to that if you fulfill certain conditions, maybe paying a fine or going to an anger management course or something like that, then your record can be expunged. So arrests and ARDs can be expunged. Summary convictions. Summary is the lowest level. So there's misdemeanors, felonies, but summaries they're essentially like traffic citations, but they are criminal convictions. They can be expunged after 5 years without any other arrest or prosecution afterward. All the fines and costs have to be paid off in the summary conviction, but you know, if 5 years have passed and you don't owe any more money on it, you can file a petition to get those expunged. Misdemeanors and felonies can also be expunged after you turn 70 years old and have gone 10 years without another arrest. Obviously, that doesn't help a lot of people who are trying to get back to work. But you should know that if you do have a conviction on your record and you're older than 70, you might be able to get those records expunged. Okay, next. Next.
Yep.
There we go. Okay. Um, there are lots of other kinds of convictions, however, that you need a pardon from the governor to get it expunged. At this point, if you're not over 70, all felonies have to get pardon from the governor. It's a very long process. It can be a very time-consuming process. There are a lot of steps to it. Over the years, fortunately, the Bureau of the Board of Pardons has made it an easier process. It's worth doing if you meet certain conditions. If the conviction was long enough ago, if you've paid off your fines and costs, if you can show that you've been rehabilitated, it's definitely worth doing. The Board of Pardons is a very robust process. They want to give people pardons. You apply, you go, if you get a hearing, you go to Harrisburg and get a hearing. There's a new process by which certain marijuana convictions are going to be sped up. The pardon process is going to be sped up. So if you've got a conviction that's for marijuana, even if it's for a felony, we really encourage people to go through the pardon process. There's even a little box which says expedited marijuana review. So to find out more about applying for a pardon, I have the link on the screen, www.bop, which stands for Board of Pardons, .pa.gov. So, if you can get a pardon, it can take several years, but we really do recommend that people try it. Okay, next slide. So there's also a new law in Pennsylvania, fairly new, called the Clean Slate Act. And the Clean Slate Act, which came into effect about a year and a half, 2 years ago, under the Clean Slate Act, all arrests that didn't end in conviction and many misdemeanor convictions are now going to be automatically sealed. So sealing is different from expungement in that it's not completely erased from the database. It's not, your fingerprints aren't erased, but it's no longer going to be accessible to the public or to employers. So right now it's very easy to see people's criminal records, right? They're all online. People can just go to the court website and find out, and background checkers can use the databases from the courts to find out whether people have convictions. Under Clean Slate, the record still exists, but it's no longer accessible to the public. So some of the misdemeanor convictions will be automatically sealed. It's after 10 years, and fines and costs have to be paid off. And there's a very complicated, the law is very complicated about which crimes can be sealed because there's a lot of exceptions that have been carved out. There are a whole bunch of other misdemeanor convictions that aren't going to be sealed automatically. It's not, the computer is not going to go through and seal them, but they're eligible to be sealed by filing a petition with the court. Again, with those charges as well, the fines and costs have to be paid off. But we, so far 30 million people, do I have that statistic right, Sharon?
34 million cases, 1 million.
1 million, okay. So far 34 million cases have already been sealed from the public. So it's a really great new law considering how hard it is to get a pardon. It's really great that so many people's records are no longer going to be accessible and held against them in the hiring process. As I said, it's very complicated to figure out whether or not individual charges are eligible to be sealed. It has to do with how many you have. It has to do with what kind of conviction. It has to do with what grade conviction it is. So, oh, Sharon, go to the next slide. So lots of people want to know whether or not their charges are eligible to be sealed. We have set up, along with the governor, a website called mycleanslatepA.com, where you can go in, anyone from around the state can go in, put in some basic information, and somebody will look up for you whether or not your charges are eligible to be sealed. And sometimes we've had lots of people who've gone through that website who, you know, we've seen maybe their charges aren't eligible to be sealed, but they've got other ones that are eligible to be expunged. So, you know, we do recommend, if you're curious to know, if you want to know whether your charges are eligible for any of these clearing, please go to mycleanslatepA.com and send us your information. Okay, next. Before I go into child abuse records, I also still want to stress that even with, you know, just what I said in the beginning, that even if you're not able to get your records completely cleared, that there are some laws that protect you. For example, if the employer is in Philadelphia, in most kinds of jobs, the employer is not even allowed to consider the conviction after 7 years. So again, you know, I'll give you information afterward about coming to us for legal help. If you're not able to clear your record and you think that an employer is using your record illegally, please come to us and we may be able to take a look at it and see if there's something that can be done. So let me move on to child abuse records. I want to start off just with the question of what is the Childline Abuse and Neglect Registry. A lot of people don't know about it, but it's a statewide database of people who've been accused of child abuse. It is not criminal. It does not mean that you have a criminal record, but if people have had some interaction with DHS, if DHS has come to investigate whether or not they've abused or neglected their child or a child that they are, work with, if you're a daycare teacher or a teacher, DHS is required to come out and investigate within 24 hours. And then the investigating caseworker basically checks off a box. And, if the investigator finds what he or she believes is evidence of child abuse, you get put on the statewide child abuse registry with what's called an indicated report. So go on to the next chart. So lots of people come into our office and they're having trouble finding a job and they think it's because of a child abuse record. Sometimes we don't even know if they're on the child abuse registry. People find out they're on the registry in 3 different ways. One is it's a recent case and they received a notification in the mail, or it's an old case and they remember receiving a notification in the mail. By law, the Childline Registry has to send you notification that you've been placed on the registry and give you the opportunity to appeal to get off. Another way that people often find out they're on the registry is that they've applied for a job and a background check was done. Any job where there's going to be direct contact with children, the law requires you to have a background check. And it's not uncommon for us to have people come into our office and say, I had no idea this was on my record. I had no idea I was on the child abuse registry. If you've had some interaction with DHS and you don't know if you're on the registry, you can find out by going to the website that I have put on this slide, or you can just Google Pennsylvania DHS and follow the links to submit a form to find out if you're on the child abuse registry. It costs $13 or free if you're trying to volunteer. But if you think there's reason to believe that you're on the child abuse registry, we encourage you to find out so that if there's a way to get off it, you'll want to get off it. Being on the child abuse registry, just like having a criminal records, is a large and growing barrier to employment. More and more jobs are doing child abuse background checks and requiring people to have clear records. So if you have found out that you're on the registry through one of these ways, the next question is, how do I get off it, right? I'm going to talk in a minute about deadlines. There are very strict deadlines, but the short answer to getting off the registry is you can send a letter to the registry itself. The child line, I've put the address up on the screen, and it can also be found online. If you're on the child abuse registry and need to get off it, the very first step to take is to write a letter to the registry and say, please get me off it, okay? There are these multi-step processes. First they look into whether they think you should stay on it, and if they still think you should be on it, they give you an opportunity for a hearing. So go on to the next step. So there's some important things to remember about child abuse records. One is that the deadlines for appealing to get off the registry are very short and very important. If you miss the deadline, or any of the deadlines, because there are several deadlines throughout the process, it's very difficult to get off. Not impossible. So one of the important things to remember is that even if your record is very old and you've missed the deadline, there may still be ways to get off it. The Secretary of Public Welfare, of Department of Human Services, has some discretion to take people off it. And there may have been something along the line that, you know, we get people off the registry even if they've missed the deadline. If they moved and we can prove they didn't get the mail, or if we can prove that they really didn't understand the notices or it was not in their language. There are different arguments that we can make to try to get people off the registry, even if they've missed the deadline. As I said, it's a multi-step process. Don't give up. If you get a letter from them saying, sorry, we're keeping you on the deadline, please go on to the next paragraph of that letter where it says, if you still think you should be off it, send in a letter, another letter to us. Each of these steps have deadlines that need to be watched. And the other important thing I want to add about this is that clearing a child abuse record is a whole separate process from what might be happening in family court or criminal court, even if it's about the same incident. So I want to urge people, if they're in family court or they're in criminal court because they're being accused of harm or neglect to a child, please make sure still to watch your mail for anything from Childline or from what's called the Bureau of Hearings and Appeals. It's a whole separate process. You still have to appeal separately, even if you think your family court lawyer or your criminal court lawyer is on top of it. Okay. And the last thing I want to say about child abuse, unless people have questions about it, is that we believe that the whole process of putting people on the registry before they have a hearing is wrong, right? People shouldn't be put on the registry and lose a lot of rights and then, only then, have the opportunity to have a hearing, and then only if they meet the deadlines. So if you have been put on the child abuse registry, if you're having trouble getting off it and you want to come talk to us about your situation, please give us a call, and we may be able to help you. Okay, so that's all I have to say about child abuse records. The last thing I want to say is, where can you get legal help if you need it? Community Legal Services is open for business, not in person. Our offices are closed. We too are working from home and working remotely, but we are doing phone intake, and all of our units are doing phone intake. So if you have need legal help, and you want to see if you're eligible for our free services, call the number that's on the screen. It's 215-981-3700. There's a whole, we all hate phone trees. So you have to be a little bit patient with our phone intake. You'll listen to the phone tree. You'll, put whatever number is correct for the unit that you have a problem with. The employment number is 7. We are taking intake. We are happy to hear from you. And if there's any way that we can help you, we will do our best to try to help you. So please, CLS is open for phone intake. We are also hoping to be open for online intake soon. We are still working on getting that process going. So feel free to, I see we've already got some questions. Feel free to text us any more of them and we will answer them for you.
Thank you, Janet. So let me quickly address the two questions that have been put to us so far. The one was from somebody who was interested in PUA benefits. The question more or less was, a person who is graduating, looking to enter the workforce, had a part-time job lined up that has been revoked because of the situation with the pandemic. Should that person be eligible for PUA? The answer is absolutely yes. That was one of the scenarios that Congress had in mind when it created PUA, that somebody who was new to the labor market but had a job to go to should be able to get benefits. The question went on to say, well, I applied, and when I tried to file my weekly claims, it was all screwed up. I'm paraphrasing. Unfortunately, that too is true for many people. The system for filing weekly claims has been extremely screwed up, and the state is working to fix it, but has not so far. So you can stay tuned for when the state manages to fix that so that you can file your weekly claims. You can keep trying. We've had some people who have failed after trying a couple of times, but have come back and managed to file some of their claims at least. Or as Janet said, you can contact us and we will stick with you until the thing is fixed and try to then help you get your weeks that you're entitled to. The second question was, as best as I could tell, about a federal case, a federal criminal case. I'm sorry to say that Congress and the federal government are the very last of any government around the country to get on board with expungement and sealing. They have basically zero for expungement or sealing. In fact, if you were arrested and went to federal court and were found not guilty, even that can't come off your record right now. Shouldn't be held against you because it was not a conviction, but it would still be on your record. I'm happy to say that there's at least renewed attention to being able to seal or expunge federal crimes. Representative Lisa Blunt Rochester from Wilmington is sponsoring a bill that would bring clean slate to the federal government for federal cases. So unfortunately, I think that bill too is kind of on hold because of the pandemic, but it is not dead and it will continue to be considered. So that gets into some more of what we've been asked. If there are other questions, we're happy to address them. What else can we tell you while we're waiting for questions?
Well, I would add to what Sharon says, that there is actually a federal pardon process. You just have to get it from the president.
That's true. And I did file my first federal pardon maybe a year and a half ago, and I'm still waiting for something to happen with it. So unfortunately, although it exists, it seems to work more quickly for some people who apply than for others. But yes, there is a federal process that you can try as well.
So if you know the president, I would make use of that connection.
Any other questions? I could speak while we're waiting about unemployment issues otherwise. As I mentioned before, 1.8 million people have applied for ordinary unemployment, and many of those people, a large number of those 1.8 million people have received their unemployment benefits. Unfortunately, a couple 100,000 have not. And if you're in those couple 100,000, you probably don't care very much about the 1.5 million or so who have gotten benefits. Uh, the reason at this point that people are most likely waiting is because there's something about your claim that requires it to be handled by an individual worker. A big thing right now is that there were many people who have to get their names and socials squared away, that the name they filed for UC under does not match the name that's on their social security account. And that requires a worker to look at your case and say, yes, this seems to be the same person. Unfortunately, it takes very long for hundreds of thousands of cases to have that process happen to them. If you filed for unemployment earlier in the pandemic and you never even got a PIN number, at this point you should give up and file again. But for many people, they have gotten PIN numbers. Hopefully, you're filing every other week so that when your claim is resolved, you can get paid for all those back weeks. Another reason that your claim may not be resolved yet is maybe your employer is contesting it. That also requires a worker to look at your case. So those are the types of reasons that regular unemployment claims might be held up. With PUA, it's much more about the glitchiness of the systems they've created. And that was a program that was stood up in a very quick way, quick in terms of what it takes to make a program. And so it just was not ready for prime time. And a lot of things still need to be squared away there. Janet, other comments?
Just that if many of you have been going through this process, we do know how frustrating it is for everyone. I just heard from a client today who just tried calling the unemployment compensation people for the 201st time. The line is always busy and the emails are backlogged. And all we can say is, please come to us if we know that it's frustrating. We're trying to help people through it as best we can. And hopefully, as Sharon said, they will get their acts together soon. Sharon, I think there's another UC question.
The question seems to be, my cousin has not yet received her benefits. Again, it could be one of those things that I just talked about, that there's a mismatch that needs to be squared away. Oh, another thing is some people had overpayments from prior UC claims, and work then needs to be done to approve them. It may be also that in those circumstances, sometimes they will end up being eligible for PUA instead. I would say that if your cousin has been waiting for a long time and did get the PIN number to file the claims, if it's been, let's say, more than 6 weeks, your cousin could check with us to see whether we can help figure out what's going on. What else can we tell you about? More questions? We'll give it a few more minutes, see if anyone wants to come in under the deadline. Um, let me tell you a little bit more about CLS in case you're not familiar with us. We help low-income individuals in Philadelphia who have civil legal problems, not criminal legal problems. Even though Janet talked about criminal records, we help people with the non-criminal court consequences of having a record. So once your case is over, if that case is causing you trouble, that's where we help out. But we do a broad range of representation, including landlord-tenant, help people defend mortgage foreclosures. We help people get all kinds of public benefits. We help people if city DHS is involved in their case and the case is in family court with their kids. We help people with consumer disputes, all kinds of things like that. So feel free to contact us. And if you call that number that Janet gave you, 981-3700, you can listen to the menu of options and let us know any particular option you would like us to look into.
Right.
Another question has come in. Are they working on back pay on the PUA site? Yes, they are. The state recognizes that there are a lot of things that are wrong. They're trying to get their computer vendor to fix it, but the process, unfortunately, has been slow. Um, Again, if you come to us for intake, we can try to help you by sticking with your case until it gets resolved. Otherwise, you can try to help yourself by just keeping an eye on the um, uh, the website for the state. They have something called PUA frequently answered questions. I just spoke with them yesterday about putting up information about all of these types of glitches that people are encountering, so people know, is my money just going to come to me, or am I going to have to do something after it's been fixed? So you may want to keep an eye on that web page on the state's website, PUA FAQs. All right, here's another question. What are the reasons you'd advise someone to reach out with you with regard to not yet having received a PIN? Do you advise they wait a certain amount of time? Um, if you've been waiting, let's say more than 4 weeks, at this point, the Department of Labor and Industry is recommending that you apply again. They had a backlog of PIN numbers at the beginning of the pandemic, but they say they are not backlogged anymore. So if you've waited, say, more than a month for a PIN, reapply. The next question is, I was able to file my first 7 weeks, and then they said, my claim is active, but currently inactive. I can't move forward. It is remarkable the number of different problems that people on PUA have encountered. I don't know whether that has something to do with one of your weekly earnings that you reported. Um, One of the solutions that we tend to give to people is that there is an email address that you can email to explain your problems to the PUA system. It is called ucpua at pa.gov. ucpua at pa.gov. Or you can send them information through your dashboard explaining what your problem is. That is in some ways the best way to address an issue like that, to say, hey, this has happened to me. Why is it happening? Can you fix it? I'm stuck. I can't claim anymore. Because from what you said here, I don't know any good reason that that would have happened to you. Unfortunately, and Janet can corroborate this, this is the kind of case we're seeing on a daily basis. That's why people get lawyers. And unfortunately, in many of these cases, we're not able to do a whole lot more than you can, except to complain to the state and try to make them fix what is wrong. Any other questions? We have a couple more minutes.
Any that you think of afterward, you can always try us uh, in our hotline, in our intake. No more? Oh, okay.
One more minute. Question 5 says, I did get paid for 7 weeks. I sent an email, but no response yet. Yes. Everything in the unemployment system involves waiting, unfortunately, including getting responses to emails. There's a similar email that you can use for the regular UC claim system. Instead of being UCPUA, it's just UC at
UC Help. Is that
UC
UC
Help,
Help?
Janet, UC Help at pa.gov. And I just read in a press conference the state had this week that the current wait to get a response from that email is 44 days.
I was convinced that was a typo.
I was convinced that was not a typo. Unfortunately.
That's unbelievable.
How can I
So,
get a lawyer is the question. Janet, how can you?
okay. So you can call us at CLS. We represent people who live in Philadelphia who are below a certain income level, and we can tell you when you call our intake line. So our intake line is 215-981-3700. And if you leave a voicemail for whichever unit your issue is in, whether it's a housing issue or if it's the unemployment compensation or an employment issue, you can leave it with the employment unit. We have like 7 different units that you can leave messages for, and intake staff will get back to you and do an intake with you. And if you're eligible for our services and we're able to help you, we are happy to do so. So please call that number, anybody who's looking for a lawyer. 215-981-3700.
And as Janet said, unfortunately, employment is the 7th option. So stick with the phone tree until you get to us and then leave a message. All right. It is 1 o'clock. I think the lunch bell is ringing to go back to work. So thank you for joining us. And
Thank you, everybody.
next week, we will have Worker Wednesday in Spanish. So if you're more comfortable in Spanish or you know somebody who is, have them check us out next Wednesday. And then I would imagine we'll be back with an English language presentation the week after that. Always Worker Wednesdays are Wednesdays at noon at this location. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a nice Memorial Day weekend.
Stay safe.
Thanks. Bye.